To our next guest. She is a Congresswoman. We're excited to have her via Skype. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. She is a Democrat representing New York's 9th District. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Thank you for having me, Carrie.
Love your scarf. Bright and bold.
Thank you.
Good morning, Congresswoman. So can you tell us a bit more about this lawsuit, Saget et al. Versus Trump? Because, you know, it's kind of something that's been lost in the news a bit lately.
Absolutely. It's a case that was brought in the Eastern District of New York that challenges the legality of Trump administration's decision to end the temporary protected status of Haitians who came to the United States in the wake of the horrific earthquake in 2010. And it basically challenges that decision based on discrimination, based on the illegalities of their determination that the ending of temporary protected status should be solely based on the reason why those individuals were brought to the United States to begin with, as opposed to looking at the totality of the conditions that these individuals would be returned to.
So what kind of feedback or responses have you gotten from the public since making a statement in favor of this lawsuit?
Well, you know, I come from a constituency in central Brooklyn that has a very large population of Haitian Americans and what I would consider to be blended families. Someone in the family is a citizen, someone is a resident, and someone may have been granted temporary protected status. So they are solidly behind the support that I'm giving to this lawsuit, as well as many fair-minded people across this nation who recognize that returning those individuals that we've brought here to protect them into an environment that is totally unstable, has not fully recovered from the earthquake, has an outbreak of cholera, has continued to really suffer from climate change conditions, whether it's flooding, whether it's food insecurity. These individuals actually provide a lifeline to the residents of Haiti who are their relatives, and they're sending remittances to. And they're also adding value, of course, to our communities here in the U.S., where they are employed, are educated, and are adding value to the communities in which they live.
So, Congresswoman, I know that the lawsuit has faced some pushback from the judge in Brooklyn, who has said it doesn't matter if the president has a potty mouth and has said offensive things. It really matters the legality and the constitutionality of this action. And you mentioned the argument about the totality of the cases versus the specific reason they were brought here. And that begs the question, if the program is called the temporary protective status, and this earthquake happened in 2010, temporary, at what point does the word temporary kick in? And shouldn't it be really focused on people who are in immediate danger?
Absolutely. However, these individuals who have been here now for close to 8 years should be given some level of consideration in terms of adjusting their status. To return them to those conditions which I spoke of and described in my description of why we believe it is inhumane to send these individuals back, I think is part of what we need to be doing when we're looking at ending that particular status of these individuals. It's not to say, okay, you've been brought here and the conditions on the ground are conducive to sending you back.
But isn't that what the argument was made in the court, where the administration was saying, yes, the conditions have improved? You mentioned cholera. The cholera infection is significantly dropped. They held elections in 2016 that the conditions on the ground have improved.
They have not improved significantly enough for individuals who have lived in a first world nation, who are now receiving adequate health care. I can tell you that the immune system, when you're returned from a first world environment into that type of environment, you become far more susceptible to any outbreaks that may be rampant in the nation. So I don't know that we've given enough consideration to what it is to return to an environment that does have political instability. I don't know if you've been watching the news recently, but they have had a number of violent outbreaks, and these are individuals who have acclimated themselves, have become part of communities here in the United States, and to return them to a regressive environment does not bode well for our nation.
So speaking of recent news, this is a related issue in terms of the debate over border security. Do you think that there's a national emergency at the southern border?
No, I don't.
Well, one thing that the president said in his address was pointing to the opioid crisis, which is killing hundreds of people every day. And 90% of drugs, for example, heroin is coming up through Mexico. So
but it's coming through the ports of entry, though. Not the vast majority of those drugs are coming through ports of entry.
Well, that's the
DEA reports show that.
Those are drugs that are confiscated.
They're also coming from U.S. pharmaceutical companies that have flooded impoverished communities across this nation from our own U.S. companies. Many of these individuals are taking painkillers. So I don't think that we can globalize this issue to the extent where we're saying that there is only one way that the opioid crisis has been dealt with. Most of the fentanyl, most of the other synthetic opioids are actually coming in through the U.S. Postal Service. So what we need to be doing if we want to secure our communities is to provide the type of support and technological advances to really screening all of our ports of entry and giving the type of personnel that's needed to be able to stem the flow of those opioid and opioid derivatives into our communities. And we can start with our own pharmaceutical companies.
I think definitely that's a bipartisan area of agreement, but there is clear evidence that Mexican drug cartels are a significant driver of the drug crisis in this country.
Sure, but I think the point she made is very true in the sense that people get addicted to opioids via legal prescriptions, and then they when they can't afford them anymore, they go to the street and they look for heroin. And if we actually, treated, and you did say there's bipartisan support for this, and it's true. If we treated drug addiction like a health issue and we treated that like a crisis instead of treating this like a border issue, then perhaps we would cut off the drug cartels, basically their customers, and we would solve the issue that way.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you, because President Trump has pointed out that President Obama in 2014 said that there was a crisis on our southern border. Do you agree with Obama of 2014?
Well, that was 4 years ago. And for us to use that as sort of the litmus test for how we move forward in the 21st century, I think is unrealistic. Right now, the crisis that we're facing is humanitarian. And one of the challenges for this administration is getting its State Department together so that we can deal with the nations in our hemisphere that are experiencing the type of extreme hardship and extreme violence that drive people out of their communities and looking for safety in the United States of America. There are many avenues by which I believe we need to, as a nation, address what is sort of driving these migrations to the United States. And we have yet to do any of that. To turn a blind eye by building a wall on the southern border does not change the crisis. It basically just blinds us to it.
Congresswoman, so when Speaker Pelosi says that to build a wall, that's immoral, even though many Democrats have voted for a wall in the past, isn't this kind of doublespeak only because it's Trump that is calling for it, when they themselves have voted for it in the past? And then the other question is that the president raised about, locking your door at night. It's not that you hate the world, it's that you want to protect what's inside. So does this rhetoric actually inflame things to call these sort of things immoral when in the past they themselves have voted for them?
But we all have our own standards standards, I believe it's immoral. For a nation that asks for us to bring us your poor and your huddled masses yearning to be free, to now build up a wall in the 21st century when for generations people have come to this nation based on famine, based on war, based on a whole host of other concerns and economic hardships. And now in the 21st century, we're saying, oh, we have to build a wall. I believe that it flies in the face of everything that this nation has been built upon and continues to keep it strong.
All right, Congresswoman, we're going to leave it right there. Thanks so much for joining us.